A baby who was initially unafraid of anything, happy, curious, and exploring the world around him. Now imagine that same baby over time becomes fearful of something he once found completely harmless. What could cause such a drastic change? This is not just a hypothetical scenario, it's the focus of the Little Albert experiment, a controversial study in psychology that investigated whether fear could be conditioned. Today we're diving into the Little Albert experiment, an exploration of how fears can be learned and how this experiment has shaped our understanding of human behavior. In 1920, John B. Watson and his assistant Rosalie Rayner conducted a study to test whether a fear could be conditioned in a baby. Their subject? An infant named Albert, who was around 9 months old at the start of the experiment. Here's how the experiment was set up. Albert was initially exposed to various stimuli, including a white rat, a rabbit, a monkey, masks, and burning newspapers. He showed no fear or negative reaction to any of these stimuli. Watson and Rayner then began the conditioning phase. They paired the presence of the white rat with a loud, frightening noise, a steel bar being struck with a hammer, that startled Albert. This loud noise was paired with the rat several times, causing Albert to become distressed and cry in response to the noise. After several pairings, Albert began to show signs of fear not only towards the white rat, but also towards other similar stimuli, such as a rabbit, a dog, and even a Santa Claus mask. This demonstrated that fear could be generalized to objects that resembled the original conditioned stimulus, the rat. The Little Albert experiment produced dramatic results. Initially, Albert was not afraid of the rat or other stimuli. However, after conditioning, he began to exhibit fear responses to the rat and other similar stimuli, showing that fear could be learned through association. This was a groundbreaking finding at the time, suggesting that emotional responses could be conditioned in the same way as other behaviors. The experiment demonstrated that fear could be acquired through conditioning, challenging the previously dominant belief that such emotional responses were innate. The Little Albert experiment is often cited as an example of classical conditioning, a concept developed by Ivan Pavlov. Here's how classical conditioning works. In classical conditioning, an unconditioned stimulus is something that naturally and automatically triggers a response. In this case, the loud noise was the unconditioned stimulus, and Albert's fear and distress were the unconditioned responses. The white rat, which initially did not provoke fear, became a conditioned stimulus when it was paired with a loud noise. After repeated pairings, Albert began to show fear in response to the rat alone, which became the conditioned response. Albert's fear extended beyond the white rat to other similar stimuli, such as a rabbit and a mask. This phenomenon is known as generalization, where a conditioned response is triggered by stimuli that are similar to the original conditioned stimulus. While the Little Albert experiment was groundbreaking, it also raised significant ethical concerns and criticisms. The experiment is often criticized for its ethical shortcomings. Albert was subjected to fear conditioning without informed consent from his guardians, and the study caused him distress. Furthermore, there was no attempt to decondition Albert's fear or alleviate the distress caused by the experiment. There was no follow-up with Albert to assess whether the conditioned fears persisted over time or how they affected his development. This lack of follow-up raises questions about the long-term impact of the experiment on Albert's emotional well-being. Some critics argue that the experiment's methodology and findings may not have been as robust as they were initially perceived. For example, it is unclear how well the findings from a single case study can be generalized to broader populations. Despite the ethical issues, the Little Albert experiment has had a lasting impact on our understanding of fear and conditioning. Here's how these concepts apply in real life. Classical conditioning plays a role in the development of phobias and anxiety disorders. For example, someone who experiences a traumatic event, such as a car accident, may develop a fear of driving. Understanding how fears can be conditioned helps in developing therapeutic techniques, such as exposure therapy, to treat these conditions. Advertisers often use classical conditioning to create positive associations with their products. For instance, pairing a product with pleasant images or music can create a positive emotional response, making consumers more likely to purchase it. Understanding how conditioning works can help educators develop effective teaching methods. By creating positive learning environments and associating educational content with rewards or positive reinforcement, teachers can improve student engagement and learning outcomes. The ethical issues raised by the Little Albert experiment have led to significant changes in research practices. Modern ethical guidelines emphasize the importance of participants or their guardians must be fully informed about the nature of the study, potential risks, and their right to withdraw at any time. Researchers must take steps to minimize any distress or harm caused by the study and ensure that participants are provided with appropriate support and debriefing. Researchers are encouraged to consider the long-term impact of their studies on participants and to follow up to address any potential issues that may arise. The Little Albert experiment remains a landmark study in psychology for several reasons. The experiment demonstrated that fear and other emotional responses can be learned through classical conditioning. The study highlighted the need for ethical considerations in research, leading to stricter guidelines and protections for participants. Understanding conditioning helps us address and manage fears, phobias, and other emotional responses in various settings. The Little Albert experiment provides valuable insights into how fear can be conditioned and how our emotional responses can be influenced by external factors. While the ethical issues associated with the study are significant, the findings have shaped our understanding of emotional conditioning and its implications. So the next time you encounter a fear or phobia, remember the lessons from Little Albert. Ask yourself, how did this fear develop, and what can I do to address it? Understanding the roots of our fears can help us manage them more effectively and lead a more balanced life.